As I was packing for the National Defense University, my fiancé warned me with a cold expression. Once you get there, settle into your dorm. Don't come running to me all the time. Frank will get jealous if he finds out. I didn't even look up, just replied flatly, okay. She had no idea I had already changed my college choice and continued. And another thing, we don't need to get our marriage license on the first day of school. A childhood promise doesn't mean anything. I paused for a second, then nodded in agreement. I didn't explain to them that I was going to the National Defense University, 1,000 miles away from home. I had already given up on her long ago and no longer held a single shred of hope. After all, her goal was the same as mine, to be completely free of each other and never meet again. Just yesterday, I went to the high school guidance counselor's office. Mr. Peterson, I've made up my mind. I'm going to college, but I'm swapping my acceptance to Harvard for the cryptography program at the National Defense University. The late autumn wind carried a chill, but my thin frame stood tall and straight, my gaze exceptionally determined. Mr. Peterson was stunned for a moment, then overjoyed. Ethan, you've finally come to your senses. I was afraid you were going to give your spot at Harvard to your cousin just to marry Chloe. But the cryptography program at the National Defense University is highly unusual. It requires a top-secret clearance and living under an assumed name. Have you discussed this with your family? There's no need to discuss it. I can make this decision myself. Hearing the word family, a flicker of pain crossed my eyes, but I quickly let it go. Once I disappear from their world completely, maybe they won't be able to take anything else from me. Just because my uncle drowned while saving me, my parents brought my cousin, Frank, to live with us, saying I owed him a life and should always give way to him. To make up for this perceived debt, my parents gave everything good to my cousin. Even my fiancé fell in love with him. My family's affection and my love life had both been stolen. Now, to take my spot at Harvard, my parents were pressuring me to agree, and Chloe even offered to marry me as part of the deal. I spent all last night thinking on my small cot on the porch, and I finally had an epiphany. This time, I wouldn't give in. I would cut all ties with them and never get involved with them again. The red maples burned like fire as I walked down the chilly street, a lonely figure. I was surrounded by factory workers in their blue coveralls heading home, riding old-fashioned cruiser bikes with happy smiles on their faces. This bustling, lively world felt completely alien to me. A military-style Jeep pulled up beside me, blocking my path. Get in. The window rolled down, revealing Chloe's cold, beautiful face. Chloe looked impatient. Did you clear things up with the school? I said nothing. Of course, I had made things clear, just not in the way Chloe had ordered. I wasn't giving up my spot at Harvard. I was going somewhere she could never find me. Before I could answer, Frank leaned forward from the back seat, showing off a pile of shopping bags. Ethan, look at all the stuff Chloe bought me. Clothes, shoes, even a new transistor radio. She said I can't look shabby when I go to Harvard. My eyes fixed on the necklace around Frank's neck, and my expression froze. It felt like my heart had been gouged out, a cold dread spreading through me. It was the locket my grandmother had left me, the one I had given to Chloe as a symbol of our engagement. I couldn't believe Chloe favored Frank so much that she would give it to him. Chloe noticed me staring. A flicker of embarrassment crossed her face before she composed herself. Frank liked it, and it's not like it's valuable. I'll buy you a better one after we're married. A bitter taste filled my mouth. The locket itself wasn't worth much, but it represented a love that Chloe had just dismissed as insignificant. It made sense. Chloe didn't love me, so of course she wouldn't cherish it. Hearing the word married, a flash of intense jealousy crossed Frank's eyes. He deliberately put on a pitiful expression. Chloe, I think Ethan's upset. Is it because he blames me for taking his spot at Harvard? I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have taken what was his. I guess I deserve to have no one. Chloe couldn't stand to see Frank upset. Her face darkened as she shot me a vicious glare. Frank's life has been hard enough. You have everything, so why do you have to fight him over this? She turned to soothe Frank. Don't worry, the spot at Harvard is yours. No one can take it away. Then she turned back to me. You can walk home, think about what you've done, and when you're ready to apologize to Frank, you can come back. I won't forgive you otherwise. With that, she slammed on the accelerator and sped away, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust fumes. From the back seat, Frank shot me a triumphant, gloating smirk. The fumes made me cough violently. See? I hadn't said a word, hadn't done a thing, yet somehow I was the one in the wrong. I stood there for a long time, until a maple leaf drifted onto my shoulder, and the biting chill seeped through my thin shirt. There was a time when my parents' favoritism left me feeling like I had nowhere to go. It was Chloe who told me that as long as she was there, my world wouldn't be lacking in love. But now, even the woman who promised to be with me forever had changed. The sky was overcast. I gave a bitter smile. Biased parents, an unfaithful fiancé, I was done with all of them. The moment I got home, I could hear cheerful laughter from inside. I glanced up at the sky, where the sunset clouds formed what looked like a giant, sarcastic face, mocking my solitary figure. Ever since my parents brought Frank to live with us, I had become utterly superfluous. Just because my uncle had saved my life, I was expected to give in to Frank's every whim. It started with toys and clothes, then my parents' affection, and now even my fiancé. I felt like a ghost haunting the edges of my own life, standing silently at the door. The laughter from inside was like a sharp knife in my heart, the pain pooling around my feet like a vast shadow, threatening to swallow me whole. I pushed the door open, and the laughter inside instantly died. It was as if my very presence had shattered their perfect family moment. My mother glanced at me and pointed to a small stool on the side. On it was a bowl of rice with a few limp vegetables. Their table, however, was laden with fish and steak. Ever since we were kids, my parents said Frank was a growing boy and needed the nutrition, so they gave him the best of everything. They forced me to be the mature one, to give up my seat at the table and my share of the good food. Now, I was living in a shabby room on the porch, eating their leftovers. My parents never seemed to consider that I was only 6 months older than Frank and needed nutrition too. My mother stood up, placed a piece of fish in my bowl with a deliberate smile. "Here's your favorite. Go on, sit down and eat." My face was blank. "Mom, I'm allergic to fish. Frank is the one who likes it." This time, instead of scolding me for being difficult like she usually did, my mother looked me in the eye with a rare, gentle expression. "Did you clear things up with the school? About giving the spot at Harvard to your cousin? Your grades are good, you can just apply again next year." I remained silent, her expression soured, her tone turning harsh. "How can you be so selfish? You owe Frank a life. Giving up a spot at Harvard is nothing compared to that. You need to be more understanding." Even though I'd been through this countless times, my mother's blatant favoritism still cut me to the core. My father slammed his fork down and suddenly slapped me across the face, his eyes burning with a hatred you'd reserve for an enemy. "How did I raise such an ungrateful brat? If you don't agree, get out of this house right now. I have no son like you." My head was ringing, a red handprint already swelling on my cheek. Facing my parents' furious stares, I felt like I was being flayed by 1,000 cuts, and I couldn't stop shaking. Frank put on a pitiful face. "Please don't force him. It hurts me to see him like this. Maybe I'm just not meant for college. It's not Ethan's fault. It's my fault for not having anyone who cares about me." My parents rushed to comfort him, promising they would make me give up the Harvard spot and buy him plenty of gifts. Frank finally smiled, then looked at my pale face. "Ethan, I never meant to take anything from you. If it bothers you this much, I can just leave." My father exploded with rage, glaring at me. "Are you happy now? Turning this house upside down? Apologize to your cousin right now." I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth, my eyes scanning each of their faces. These people, my supposed family, were actively trying to destroy me. Just as my father was about to hit me again, my mother's expression softened slightly, and she let out a huff. My mother thought for a moment, then looked at me. "At least you have some sense. Since your cousin is going to college, you can get a job and earn money for his tuition. Remember, this is what you owe him." I stared blankly at my mother. How could the woman who gave birth to me say something so cruel? My mother, seemingly indifferent to my reaction, commanded in a tone that left no room for argument. "You'll start working after the summer. You're just sitting around the house anyway." My father nodded in agreement. The family then started planning a celebration party for Frank. Getting into Harvard, after all, was a huge deal that brought honor to the family name. No one paid any attention to me. My existence was like the household trash can, useful for a moment, then tossed aside without a second thought. I don't know when I ended up on my cot, but my heart had gone numb from the pain. The oppressive, loveless atmosphere of this house was suffocating. The threadbare sheet beneath me, which I'd had for over a decade and barely covered half my body, was damp and smelled of mildew. Frank, meanwhile, had a bright, spacious room filled with toys and candy from the general store. I was left to sleep on the narrow, exposed porch, through wind, rain, and snow, for 10 long years. It was a hot summer, but my heart felt like ice. I stared up at the night sky, thinking that in just over a month, I would finally be able to leave this place devoid of love. Since this family didn't need me, I would simply disappear from their lives forever. That night, I had a dream. I dreamed of being a child, my parents holding me in their arms, their eyes full of love and care. Chloe, 2 years my senior, would pinch my cheeks and say, "You're so cute." It felt like I was floating in a warm spring, and I never wanted to wake up. But then Frank appeared like a nightmare. My parents' faces twisted into monstrous snarls as they screamed at me, and Chloe turned and walked away, getting smaller and smaller in the distance. I cried out, "Mom, Dad, Chloe, don't leave me." I ran after them desperately, but the ground beneath my feet gave way to a bottomless abyss, and I fell. I was surrounded by despair and pain, unable to struggle. My parents and Chloe never looked back. They gathered around Frank and walked off into the distance, leaving me to fall forever into an endless darkness. The sound of fireworks outside woke me. I opened my eyes. I thought I was past being hurt by them, but deep down, I still craved their love and approval. Thankfully, it was only a dream. A Jeep pulled into the driveway. When I saw the tall man getting out, I hurried downstairs. "Ethan, I heard you got into Harvard. Well done." The tall man was Chloe's father, Mr. Anderson. He was an old family friend. My father had once saved his life, which was why our parents had arranged for us to be engaged as children. Mr. Anderson was about the only person who was genuinely kind to me. Mr. Anderson ruffled my hair, then glanced at his daughter beside him and nodded. "At least you have some sense. Celebrating for Ethan with fireworks." Chloe frowned. "Dad, they're not for Ethan. He said he doesn't want to go to college, so he's giving his spot at Harvard to Frank. Frank will study hard and won't let anyone down." Mr. Anderson's expression soured. He was about to reprimand her, but I stopped him. I forced a smile. "Sir, you just got home. You should rest. I can explain another time." I didn't want Mr. Anderson to press the issue, or he might find out about my application to the cryptography program at the National Defense University. I just wanted to leave quietly, without any more drama. Mr. Anderson's expression tightened. He shot his daughter a glare and stormed off. That left just Chloe and me. Chloe's face was unreadable. "Don't mention the marriage license to my dad yet, and you'd better have a good explanation for giving up your spot at Harvard, understand?" I just looked at the ground and mumbled an affirmation, showing no other reaction. Chloe was willing to marry a man she didn't love just to help Frank get into Harvard. How noble of her. "Frank is sensitive, he can't handle stress, so you'd better not mention us getting married in front of him. And another thing, I told you to apologize yesterday. Why haven't you?" Before I could say anything, Chloe pressed on. "Frank is leaving for Harvard soon. You should give him some of your savings for supplies. It would be a nice way to show your support." Seeing how Chloe put Frank's needs above all else felt like a heavy stone pressing on my chest, making it hard to breathe. "Do you really think I have any money to spare? With you and my parents spoiling him, is he really lacking for anything?" Chloe froze, finally remembering my situation. A complicated look crossed her face. "Don't worry," she said, trying to reassure me with the only thing she could. "I promised I'd marry you, and I won't break my promise." Marriage was the only comfort she could offer. "Chloe, are you really going to marry him?" The color drained from Chloe's face as she whipped her head toward the house. Frank was leaning against the doorframe, his face ashen, his expression a mask of agony. "It's not supposed to be like this." Before Chloe could explain, Frank started banging his head against the wall, his face contorted in pain. "I don't want you to marry him. I love you too, Chloe." Frank's display of anguish sent Chloe into a panic. She shoved me aside and rushed to hold him. My parents came out as well, and their faces paled when they saw Frank. The three of them rushed Frank into the car and sped off towards the hospital. Just before she left, Chloe shot me a look of pure ice. "Are you happy now? You did that on purpose to provoke him, didn't you? I never knew you could be so cruel." Her look of disgust and contempt felt like a sledgehammer to my chest. All Frank had to do was act upset, and the entire family would bend over backwards for him, and everything would somehow be my fault. The image of Chloe's furious face flashed in my mind. I told myself not to grieve over a woman who didn't love me, but my heart still ached. Frank's little act was so transparent. Anyone could see through it if they just paid attention. It was Chloe who used to hate how my family favored Frank. When I was at my lowest, she was the one who stormed into my house, took me away, and announced to the whole neighborhood that no one was allowed to bully me anymore. Chloe was so good to me back then. I don't know when it started, but Chloe changed. Her disgust for Frank slowly morphed into sympathy. It was like Frank was my personal curse, destined to take everything that was mine. I watched the car disappear down the road, my expression cold. This would be the last time I felt sorrow for Chloe, and the last time I felt sorrow for this loveless home. From now on, I would live for myself. I would dedicate my life to serving my country. I went back to the house and started cleaning up my small space on the porch. Inside a worn-out box, I had treasured every gift Chloe had ever given me, from a wooden puppet to a single autumn leaf. I once considered her gifts to be my greatest treasures, but now they were just junk. I gathered every last gift, took them out to the yard, and set them ablaze, letting my love for Chloe turn to ash with them. Just as the last of the gifts were turning to embers, Chloe returned and saw what I was doing. When she saw the wooden puppet burning, the color drained from her face, and a wave of panic washed over her. Her voice trembled as she stared at me in disbelief. "Ethan, those are the gifts I gave you. Why are you burning them?" It felt as if something was slipping from her grasp, filling her with a strange anxiety. I watched the puppet burn until it was nothing but charcoal. Only then did I slowly turn to meet her eyes, my own gaze perfectly calm. In that instant, Chloe felt a sudden certainty that I was about to walk out of her life forever. I took a deep breath. As the gifts turned to ash, I felt a long-held obsession inside me finally dissolve. I no longer cared who my parents favored. I no longer cared who Chloe loved. None of it had anything to do with me anymore. I was going to walk my own path. They were getting moldy, so I burned them. My first instinct was to lay it all out, to tell her I didn't love her anymore, but I remembered I still had about 3 weeks before I could leave for good, so I held my tongue. Chloe looked relieved. "Well, it's probably for the best. They weren't worth much anyway. We can buy new things after we're married." I just smiled, thinking to myself, we're not getting married. There is no Chloe reasoned that, besides her, I had no other options. It was impossible for me to leave. Her earlier anxiety must have been for nothing. Chloe's superior air returned. She frowned, her expression disapproving. "Don't walk around with such a sour face. Frank lost his parents, he has depression, he can't take any more stress. You have everything, you don't need to fight over things." I let out a sarcastic laugh. "Then tell me, what is it that I have? The love of my parents? The affection of my fiancé? I don't even own a decent set of clothes. Frank has taken everything that was mine. What more do you want me to give up?" Chloe couldn't stand hearing me complain and grew impatient. "You have your parents, don't you? And you have me. Frank is suffering in the hospital right now. You should go and apologize." I thought I must have misheard her. Frank's depression was obviously an act, but they all pretended not to notice. My voice was flat. "He has my parents by his side, he has you taking care of him, and he's surrounded by doctors and nurses. Do you really think he needs me there?" Chloe flared up. "How can you be so heartless? His depression is your fault. Regardless, you're his cousin, you need to be the bigger person. You still don't see what you did wrong. I guess I've been too easy on you. Ethan, I'm giving you one last chance. If you don't go to the hospital, we can just postpone getting married." With that, she stormed off, as if threatening me with our marriage would make me obey her unconditionally. I paid her no mind, watching her car drive away with a placid expression. Back in the house, I looked around for things to pack, only to realize that in this entire house, there was nothing of mine worth taking. That evening, my parents came home. They wouldn't even look at me, clearly blaming me for upsetting Frank. My mother came to me, her face grim. "Ethan, you need to let Chloe go. Frank likes her too, and he's in the hospital threatening to kill himself over it. You're his older cousin. You need to be magnanimous." I knew my mother's favoritism for Frank was pathological, but I never imagined she could be this shameless. In the sweltering summer heat, her words felt like an icy, merciless wind. My face was numb. I stared into my mother's eyes, my voice hoarse. "Mom, I'm your son, your own son. You always told me to give in to Frank, and I did. Haven't I given up enough over the years? Every new thing in this house, the meat on the dinner table, new clothes, my own room, what haven't I given him? I'm already giving up Harvard, and now you want me to give up my fiancé? If he said he wanted my life, would you tell me to cut out my own heart? Mom, am I even your son?" I couldn't control my anger any longer, the question tearing out from the depths of my soul. My mother slapped me across the face, her expression filled with disappointment. "He's your cousin. He lost his father because of you. Don't you have enough already?" Chloe was right. "You are an ungrateful person. This time you will give in whether you like it or not. Otherwise, you are no son of mine." She left me with those cruel words and turned away. I leaned against the doorframe, the setting sun overhead looking like a cruel, mocking face, laughing at the joke my life had become. In their eyes, I apparently had a wonderful life. A short while later, Chloe returned. She got straight to the point. "Ethan, Frank is in a very bad state mentally. We're postponing the wedding." It wasn't a discussion, it was an order. Fortunately, I had accumulated so much disappointment that I no longer felt any sadness. I managed a weak, pale smile and said, each word deliberate and clear, "Okay." Chloe was clearly not expecting me to agree so readily. She seemed at a loss for words, standing frozen in place for a long moment. I didn't look at Chloe. My gaze rested on the sycamore tree outside the yard. I remembered when I was 11, how Frank had framed me, and my parents had beaten me until I was black and blue before throwing me out of the house. I was alone and hopeless, crying under that sycamore tree, when Chloe walked up to me, held out her hand, and said with a gentle smile, "Come home with me." Back then, she was like a beacon of light in my dark world. From that day on, I had someone to rely on and I had hope. Chloe wanted me to get into Harvard and achieve my dreams. So, when the SATs became the standard again, I studied relentlessly and finally earned my acceptance. I thought we could build a life together, that I could follow her anywhere, but now it all seemed like a beautiful, unattainable mirage. The Chloe standing before me now was a completely different person, pushing me to compromise at every turn. Marrying a man she didn't love just so Frank could go to Harvard. Truly a great romance. The moment Chloe said we were postponing the wedding, I felt a sense of calm. I no longer held any hope for us. Postponing it now meant she would break her promise later. I would lose my chance at college and she would never marry me. I was sure of it. Thank goodness I hadn't actually given up my spot at Harvard. In just over 3 weeks, I would leave this place of sorrow and head to the National Defense University, cutting them out of my life for good. "Ethan, don't read too much into it," Chloe said, her voice softening as if she sensed my detachment. "I made you a promise, and I won't break it. It's just that Frank is unstable right now, and I don't want to set him off." My calm, quiet demeanor seemed to unnerve her, and she felt compelled to explain. I pulled my gaze away from the sycamore tree and suddenly asked her, "Do you remember what you promised me under that tree when I was 11? Her expression shifted, a flicker of guilt in her eyes as if she remembered. But just as she was about to speak, one of her father's aides rushed up, looking anxious. "Captain Anderson, we just got a call from the hospital. He's hurting himself again." Chloe frowned, and without another glance at me, she turned and ran for the car. I watched the Jeep speed away, then turned and went back to my room on the porch. There wasn't much there on that small porch. After burning Chloe's gifts, all I had left were a few ragged clothes. It seemed my parents had given me nothing in this life but my own existence. They had given me things before, but I was always forced to give them to Frank. Chloe was gone for a week. My parents and she spent the whole week at the hospital with Frank. I was glad for the peace, not having to see Frank's sickening face or deal with my parents' favoritism. I went to see Mr. Anderson and asked if he could help me get in shape to prepare for the National Defense University. Since I had decided on the cryptography program, I knew I would face many dangers in the future. Mr. Anderson didn't ask questions. He just saw my motivation and began training me without holding anything back. Another week went by. I was working out in the yard, drenched in sweat but feeling invigorated. I'd buzzed my hair short. Chloe used to say she liked artistic types, so I had kept my hair longer. Now I was living for myself. Cutting my hair felt like shedding an old skin. Mr. Anderson saw it and remarked that I finally looked like a real soldier. Although Mr. Anderson didn't know the specifics of why I was training so hard, he seemed to have a hunch and didn't press me for details. He believed young people should sort out their own problems. He did, however, think the favoritism from his old friends next door was getting out of hand. He was away on assignment so often that it was hard for him to intervene. But he made it clear that if I needed help, he would be there for me. My peaceful routine was shattered when Frank finally came home. I was in the yard practicing my stances when I looked up to see my parents and Chloe walking in, laughing and chatting as they doted on Frank. Frank was practically glued to Chloe's side, looking incredibly close with her. My parents stood by, pretending not to notice, though they clearly approved. Chloe didn't push him away either, not until she felt my eyes on them. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, she gently pushed him off. Frank immediately pouted. "Chloe, are you trying to get away from me?" Chloe looked awkward but let Frank lean on her again. As Frank walked past me into the house, he shot me a look of pure provocation and scorn. My expression remained calm, as if these 4 people were complete strangers. I returned to my exercises. An hour passed. I finished my workout and let out a long breath. A rare cool breeze drifted by. I closed my eyes, savoring the brief moment of peace. "The National Defense University?" A trembling voice came from behind me. I opened my eyes to see Chloe standing there, clutching a brochure, her eyes wide with panic. She had been in Frank's room when she happened to glance out at my porch and saw the brochure for the National Defense University on my cot. A deep sense of unease had compelled her to come downstairs and ask me about it. "Why are you looking at information about the National Defense University?" Faced with her question, I remained calm. Instead of answering right away, I picked up a towel and wiped the sweat from my face. "Answer me." Chloe grabbed my arm, her body trembling as if she were about to lose something precious. I gently pried her fingers from my arm. This was the hand I had longed to hold so many times, but now I felt nothing. I smiled faintly. "Just browsing." She stared into my eyes, and seeing no deception, she seemed to decide I wouldn't lie to her about this. A wave of relief washed over her. She nodded. "Well, there's not much to see anyway. You're not really built for a military academy. You're better off just studying and reapplying to other colleges next year. With your grades, you'll have plenty of opportunities." I was non-committal. "You think I'll have the chance? Mom and Dad want me to get a job after the summer to pay for Frank's tuition. I'll have to start soon." The color drained from Chloe's face. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she held back, as if feeling a pang of guilt. Her tone softened. "Don't worry, I won't let them make you get a job. And don't worry about the money. I've already set aside enough to cover Frank's tuition." I let out a self-deprecating laugh. See how good she was to Frank? She had all the bases covered. Not only did she force me to give up my spot at Harvard, she had his tuition ready to go. I had to admit they made a happy little family unit. I could see the panic in her eyes, but I knew it wasn't love for me. It was just a twinge of guilt. I was certain that the moment Frank threw a tantrum, my parents would force me to get a job, and Chloe would stand by and say nothing. Luckily for me, I no longer cared. Chloe saw my silence and mistook it for jealousy. She reached out to ruffle my hair, only to finally notice that I'd buzzed it short, a stark contrast to my previous, longer style. For some reason, even though I was standing right in front of her, she had the unsettling feeling that I was slipping away, that things were spiraling out of her control. "Ethan, I am going to marry you," Chloe said, her voice firm, as if trying to convince herself as much as me. "Believe me, it's just a delay. We just need more time." Her tone was resolute, leaving no room for doubt. In the past, her words would have made me ecstatic. Now, all I could manage was a quiet, "Oh." My calm, detached expression only seemed to heighten her anxiety. From the second-floor balcony, Frank watched the two of us, his eyes burning with a deep-seated hatred. I went to bed early that night, partly because I was exhausted from training, but mostly to avoid watching my parents dote on Frank. The next morning, I left for the high school. In the counselor's office, I met a man in a crisp military uniform. He had an air of resolute strength that was immediately respectable. He introduced himself as an instructor from the National Defense University's cryptography program. He was in town on assignment and was also tasked with escorting me to the academy. The cryptography program was unique. It was an early admission track that bypassed the standard process. There was no formal acceptance letter. Instead, an instructor from the university personally escorted new cadets to a classified training facility. After we finalized the paperwork, the instructor told me he would be back in 1 week to pick me up. On the way home, I pictured the instructor in his dress uniform, and a sense of purpose filled me. I thought that if I studied hard and served my country, one day I could be like him. My home might be a cold, loveless place, but I had found a new sense of hope. I couldn't wait for the day I would leave for the academy. By the time I got back to the house, it was getting dark, and my parents were gone. I went inside and found Frank sitting on my cot, looking down at me with a condescending smirk. "You know, Ethan," he began, his voice dripping with mock sympathy, "I think Chloe likes me more." He continued his taunts. "See? Anything of yours that I want, I can have. So why are you still here? Why don't you just do everyone a favor and disappear?" But I had a new hope now, and his provocations meant nothing to me. Frank had expected to get a rise out of me, to drive me into a rage like he used to. He loved seeing me broken and in pain, and would laugh triumphantly. But this time, my calm expression made his taunts fall flat, like punching a pillow. His face soured. Frank didn't like this feeling. The memory of Chloe's promise to me earlier that day sent him into a jealous fury. Even with his self-harming theatrics, Chloe had only postponed her marriage to me. She hadn't chosen him. That's why he had resorted to taunts. But my indifference only fueled his jealousy further. A crazed look flashed in Frank's eyes. He grabbed me, his voice laced with ice. "Tell me, if you were to push me off this balcony in a fit of jealousy, who do you think they would believe?" My face went pale. I tried to pull away, but he shoved me hard, sending me over the railing. "Help! He's trying to kill me!" Frank first slammed his own head against the wall until he was bleeding, then he ran downstairs and collapsed on the ground next to me. I had fallen from the second-story porch, my body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The pain was so intense I couldn't breathe. Frank's screams immediately brought my parents and Chloe running. When they saw the two of us on the ground, my parents didn't hesitate. My father kicked me hard in the stomach, roaring, "How could you do this to Frank?" I stared in shock at my parents' contorted, furious faces, any words of explanation dying in my throat. I closed my eyes, a sharp pain piercing my heart. "I never knew you were so vicious," my father screamed, his eyes red with rage, "trying to kill him out of jealousy. You're a monster. I have no son." He looked at me as if I were his mortal enemy and kicked me again. My mother helped Frank up, crying hysterically. "I'm so sorry. I was only gone for a minute. I never thought this would happen." "Frank, hang on. I'm taking you to the hospital." Frank's face was covered in blood, making his injuries look much worse than the superficial cuts they were. He let out a pained scream that twisted the hearts of my parents and Chloe, but from an angle they couldn't see, he gave me a malicious, triumphant sneer. I had fallen from the second story. My injuries were far more severe than his, but I couldn't speak. After being kicked several times, my body was curled in on itself in agony. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional trauma. My parents would never believe me. Explanations were useless. They trusted Frank unconditionally. Took me several minutes to get to my feet. My face was ashen, and I couldn't stop shaking. My eyes found Chloe, her face a mask of pure disappointment. Frank started crying pitifully. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have been so needy with Chloe. I know you hate me. If it would make you happy, I'd give you my life. I don't want to make Aunt and Uncle or Chloe sad." I watched Frank's performance with cold eyes, then looked at my parents' furious faces. A wave of darkness and despair washed over me. I was used to the loneliness and the pain. I had already decided to let them all go, my parents, Chloe. I didn't want these toxic people in my life anymore. So why did Frank have to keep framing me? Chloe slapped me hard across the face, her beautiful features frozen in a cold mask. "I told you I would marry you. Why did you have to hurt Frank? He's already been through so much. Are you trying to kill him?" A red handprint bloomed on my cheek, and I could taste blood. I stared at Chloe in a daze. Just like my parents, she believed Frank without question. In their eyes, I was the evil one. I had wanted to try to explain, thinking she at least might have some doubts. But now I saw there was no point. Chloe shook her head, her face filled with disappointment. "How can I marry someone so ruthless? Ethan, you have truly disappointed me." Without another glance in my direction, the three of them helped Frank into the car and left for the hospital. Frank looked back over his shoulder and gave me a smile that looked like it belonged on a devil crawling up from hell. As their car disappeared from view, I couldn't stand any longer. I coughed up a mouthful of blood and collapsed. The night was still and silent. I opened my eyes, feeling nothing but cold. I woke up to a body that was completely numb. I managed to drag myself back to the house and collapsed on my cot. After a few hours, I had enough strength to tend to my own wounds. The night air was cool, but it was nothing compared to the ice in my heart. The actions of my parents and Chloe were like a dull knife, slowly carving a hole in my heart. My already shattered spirit broke completely. I felt like a wounded animal, licking my wounds alone in the darkness of the porch. I had no more tears to cry. My feelings were numb. All that remained was an empty shell. All I wanted was for time to speed up. I couldn't bear to stay in that house a moment longer. This cold, heartless house felt like a gaping maw, ready to swallow me whole. I lay on my cot, staring at the night sky, and thought of my grandmother. I missed her terribly. She was the only person in the world who had ever truly loved me. I drifted into a hazy sleep, only to be jolted awake by a bucket of cold water thrown on me. Before I could even open my eyes, I was grabbed and dragged forcefully into the living room. My parents and Chloe were back from the hospital with Frank. Even though his injuries were minor, in their eyes, my actions were unforgivable. My father kicked me hard, his face a dark thundercloud. "Ethan, get on your knees and apologize to Frank right now. If he doesn't forgive you, you are no longer my son." A cold house, a heartless family. My already broken heart shattered into a million more pieces. My eyes scanned their faces. My parents' looks of disgust and hatred, Chloe's disappointed gaze, and the triumphant smirk Frank couldn't hide. These were supposed to be the people closest to me, yet they hurt me again and again, more cruelly than any enemy could. It was Frank who had set me up, yet I was the one being forced to kneel and apologize. In the past, I would have given in, desperate to win back their love and approval. But now I just hated who I was. Why was I born into such a cold-hearted family? Seeing my defiance, my father's face contorted with rage. He kicked me again. "You still think you've done nothing wrong?" he roared. I staggered and fell, coughing up more blood. Chloe's expression flickered. She looked like she wanted to help me, but then she seemed to think better of it, as if deciding a little punishment might still save me. She stopped my father, shaking her head slightly. My father finally backed off. For a fleeting moment, I thought she was going to defend me, but her next words made me want to laugh hysterically. Chloe frowned, her expression cold and distant. "Seeing you like this, I don't think you're fit to marry me. If Frank hadn't been so lucky, he could have been killed. As your punishment, our wedding is postponed. And to make it up to Frank, I'm going to have a wedding ceremony with him first." I stared at her in disbelief. What kind of punishment was that? She saw the sarcasm in my eyes and grew defensive. "It's not a real marriage. I'm just doing it to make Frank feel better." My parents and Chloe stared at me, instinctively moving to shield Frank, as if expecting me to lash out. But they were disappointed. I didn't get angry. Instead, I smiled a wide, bloody grin. "Well then, congratulations, Frank. And to you too, future Mrs. Miller. Are we done here? If so, I'm going to get some rest." I dragged myself painfully back to the porch, not wanting to spare them another glance. Frank put on his pitiful act again. "Ethan, you'll come to my wedding with Chloe, won't you? I know it's just for show, but it would mean so much to me. I'd love to have your blessing." My father snorted. "Don't worry. If he doesn't want to come, I'll drag him there myself. Does he think he can get away with this without consequences?" My mother yelled at my retreating back. "If you don't show up, you can get out of this house for good." For some reason, Chloe felt a surge of anxiety. She hadn't seen the jealous rage she expected from me. She wasn't actually going to marry Frank. It was just for show. In her mind, I had lost myself to jealousy, and this was a lesson I needed to learn. If I could just learn my lesson this time, perhaps I could still be saved. After the ceremony, she would talk to me, really talk to me. But my words, "future Mrs. Miller," and the look of relief on my face, felt like a thorn piercing her heart. Why did she feel this way? After that, the three of them paid me no more attention. They didn't care if I was seriously injured from the fall, and they didn't care if I ran away. In their minds, I was too attached to this family and too in love with Chloe to ever leave. In their world, I had nowhere else to go. For the next 3 days, I didn't cause any trouble. I just stayed home, recovering from my injuries. Meanwhile, my parents and Chloe were busy and happy, preparing for the wedding. The ceremony was to be held at the community hall, a huge expense back then. But to make Frank happy, my parents had spared no expense, using up all their savings. The day of the wedding arrived. I had packed my meager belongings early that morning and was waiting for the instructor from the National Defense University. My parents and Frank had already left for the community hall to greet guests. As she was in the service, Chloe wasn't wearing a wedding dress, but her uniform. She came to me. "Ethan, you should come with me. This thing with Frank is just for show. We're not actually getting married. Don't worry, I'm still going to marry you." She made her promise with such conviction, just like she had when I was 11, when she found me crying under the sycamore tree after my parents had thrown me out. She had brought me hope then, and promised she would never leave me. But in the years since, she had changed completely. My face remained calm. I just gave a quiet hum of acknowledgement. Chloe breathed a sigh of relief. She had been afraid I would cause a scene at the ceremony. But from the looks of it, I had learned my lesson and would be more compliant from now on. She insisted on taking me with her to the hall, but when she didn't see the reaction she was hoping for on my face, a flicker of panic crossed hers. I responded to her calmly, as if she were a complete stranger, not the woman I was supposed to love. Just as she was about to physically drag me into the car, her father's aide came and said they were waiting for her at the hall. Chloe finally relented, but not before telling me that I had to show up, or our own wedding would be off for good. I watched her hurry away, my face blank. Then I picked up my bag and walked out of the yard. Just as her car pulled away, the instructor from the National Defense University arrived. The instructor asked if I wanted to say goodbye to my family. I glanced back at the house, a place that held 15 years of my pain. I never wanted to set foot in it again. My biased parents, my unfaithful fiancé, I never wanted to see any of them again. There's no need. I got into the car without hesitation. Once I joined the cryptography program at the National Defense University, my real identity would be erased. I would live under an assumed name for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life, I would not be their son, and I would not be Chloe's husband. I would be my own man, and I would serve my country. The car passed by the community hall, and through the window, I saw them standing at the entrance, greeting guests. My parents and Frank were beaming with happiness. Chloe stood beside them, looking shy and a little expectant. The four of them looked like a perfect family. As the car pulled away, the four of them at the community hall slowly faded from sight. I was finally going to live my own life. At the entrance to the hall, Chloe seemed to sense something. She looked up sharply, just in time to see the Jeep carrying me drive away. For some reason, a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Mr. and Mrs. Clark were beaming, telling everyone they were celebrating two happy occasions: Frank getting into Harvard and marrying the prettiest girl in the neighborhood. Chloe felt a pang of discomfort. The spot at Harvard, the wedding, all of it should have been for Ethan. She had only agreed to this charade as part of Frank's therapy, but listening to them, you'd think it was all real. Frank clung to Chloe's arm, scanning the crowd with a pitiful expression. Where's Ethan? Didn't he promise he'd come? Is he angry? Does he not want me to be happy? If I'd known he'd be this upset, I would have begged for his forgiveness. He was playing the victim again. Mr. Clark's face darkened. That ungrateful brat, he snorted. I regret the day he was born. He's not worth a fraction of what Frank is. Mrs. Clark nodded in agreement. Ethan is so thoughtless, not even showing up for his cousin's wedding. He used to bully Frank all the time, but Frank was always the bigger person. And after what he did the other day, nearly killing him, now he's the one who's sulking? I'm going to give him a piece of my mind when we get home. They were in complete agreement. On Frank's big day, I was expected to be gracious. Frank added fuel to the fire, looking down demurely. Maybe it's because he likes you, Chloe. I never meant to really take you from him. I just wanted to know what it felt like to get married. We can call it off after the ceremony. If he's this angry, maybe we shouldn't do it at all. His tried and true tactic of playing the martyr worked again, stoking the flames of my parents' anger. Picturing my pained and desperate face while listening to my parents curse my name, Frank felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Chloe kept looking out at the street. When I didn't appear, she grew more and more agitated. She had only agreed to the ceremony to fulfill Frank's supposed dying wish, not because she actually intended to marry him. She thought I shouldn't be so petty, that I should understand that a life was on the line. But she couldn't shake the image of my calm, indifferent face. The ceremony was about to begin, and I still wasn't there. Chloe couldn't wait any longer and headed outside. Frank hurried to stop her. Chloe, are you leaving me? Chloe whipped around, her gaze sharp and cold as it landed on Frank's face. For a second, he was so startled that he forgot to look pitiful. He had rarely seen such a fearsome look on her face. Chloe was incredibly agitated. She had a terrible feeling that something was wrong. A voice in her head told her she had to go back to the house. I'm going to get him. This time, she ignored Frank and strode away. On the drive back, she realized her mistake. She should have explained it to me more clearly, that it wasn't a real wedding, just an act. She drove back as fast as she could, ran into the house, and went straight to my room on the porch. Ethan, stop sulking. Everyone is waiting for you. She pushed aside the curtain. The small, damp space was now completely empty and clean. My small folding cot was gone. The only thing left was the low table I used as a desk, and on it was a single sheet of paper. I'm done with this family. Chloe, we will never meet again. The two short sentences hit her like a sledgehammer to the chest. Chloe fought back a wave of panic, muttering to herself, Ethan has to be joking. In her mind, I had nowhere else to go. I would never be able to leave her or my parents. She thought she knew me so well. She thought I had endured years of mistreatment just to stay close to my parents, desperate for their love. But the scene before her filled her with a terrible sense of dread. Unwilling to accept it, she searched the yard. As she looked around, she realized with growing panic that every trace of me was gone. The crabapple tree I had planted for her when I was 15 was gone. The red ribbon I had tied to the swing set for her as a good luck charm when I was 17 was also gone. She rushed to the sycamore tree at the edge of the yard. She remembered how I used to love sitting under that tree, how I would bury my deepest secrets in a small jar in the dirt there. My desperate longing for my parents' love, my secret feelings for her, all of it was written on slips of paper inside that jar. But what she saw now made her feel as if she'd been struck by lightning. The dirt had been dug up, the jar smashed to pieces, and its contents burned to ash. It was then that Chloe finally understood. I was really gone. She sank to the ground under the sycamore tree, staring blankly at the ashes. The signs of my departure had been there all along, but no one had bothered to notice. An unloved child would leave with such finality, burning her gifts, destroying every good memory, not taking so much as a single leaf with him. She was only pretending to marry Frank to grant his wish. She had never said she was abandoning me, so why had I left? Even now, she couldn't understand it. She just felt the hot summer air was thick and heavy, pressing down on her chest. A hot breeze rustled the leaves of the sycamore tree, sending a few fluttering to the ground. She looked up, dazed, and for a moment, she could almost see him again, the small, heartbroken boy abandoned by his family, crying under this very tree. She had reached out her hand and promised him he would never be alone again. That night, under the cool moonlight, his eyes had been filled with light, but somewhere along the way, he had become numb, a walking shell, just as he had been before she found him. Maybe it started when she offered to marry him in exchange for his spot at Harvard. She could still remember the shocked look on his face. She had always known about his crush on her, but she had never acknowledged it, afraid of what people would say. Then his parents had come to her, asking her to persuade him to give his spot at Harvard to Frank. She knew it was wrong. She knew how much Harvard meant to him, but in that moment, looking for an excuse to finally make their engagement official, she had inexplicably suggested the trade. She never expected him to agree without a moment's hesitation. She had thought that with his grades, he could easily get in again the next year, and then they could finally be together without anyone's objections. But it seemed he had misunderstood something, and had chosen to let go of everything and walk away. He can't have gone far. Chloe suddenly stood up, a thought striking her. He had nowhere to go. She immediately started making calls, using all of her father's connections to check the bus and train stations. She had to find him, but after half a day of mobilizing every resource available to her, there was still no sign of me. It was as if I had vanished into thin air. The commotion eventually reached Mr. Anderson. His daughter abusing her authority was a serious matter. He rushed home, but when he saw his daughter's desolate figure sitting on the doorstep, the angry words he had prepared died in his throat, replaced by a heavy sigh. Mr. Anderson, guessing what had happened, first called off the search for me to prevent her from getting into serious trouble. Then he told her his suspicion. Ethan has gone to college. Chloe looked up, her face a picture of disbelief. But the official letters from Harvard don't come out for another 2 weeks. Mr. Anderson gave a cold laugh. Who told you he was going to Harvard? He enrolled at the National Defense University. Chloe felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Seeing his daughter so broken, and thinking of how I had been treated for years, he couldn't help his frustration. I don't know what you're so upset about. You didn't appreciate him when he was here, and now that he's gone, who is this sadness for? Don't you realize that you all are the ones who drove him away? His words sent a numbing shock through her. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. A flood of images rushed into her mind. All those years of my parents' twisted favoritism, and the torment I had endured because of it. She had known it was happening. She had once been my protector. But what had she done recently? Instead of standing by my side as she used to, she had joined in with my tormentors. She suddenly remembered 3 days ago, when Frank claimed I had pushed him. She remembered the way I had looked at her, with that same hopeful expression I always had, just looking for a shred of kindness. And she had not only believed Frank without question, but had slapped me across the face. That slap had shattered the last of my hope. Mr. Anderson knew his daughter wasn't in any state to listen to reason, so he didn't say any more. Considering how my parents and his own daughter had behaved, he thought I should have left long ago. Ethan was a good kid. He would only find happiness by getting away from that family. He had offered to help me long ago, but I was stubborn, still holding out hope for my parents' love, and had suffered so much for it. If it were me, I would have been gone years ago, Mr. Anderson said angrily and strode off. As a military man, he had no time for such domestic drama. Chloe stood in the living room, replaying my reactions over the past few weeks in her mind. Perhaps I had lost all hope the moment she made that offer. And she remembered the night I had asked her, so seriously, "Do you remember what you promised me?" Chloe sank to the floor, clutching her head in her hands, overwhelmed with regret. The night air was cool. She heard hurried footsteps approaching from outside. Mrs. Clark burst in, her face frantic. "Chloe, Frank thinks you've abandoned him. He's having a meltdown at the reception hall." Listening to Mrs. Clark ramble on, her every word a worry about Frank, Chloe felt a surge of irritation. She looked up sharply. "What good will it do for him to look for me? You only ever see Frank. Do you even know where your own son has gone?" Mrs. Clark looked stunned and a little embarrassed. What are you talking about? Of course I care about Ethan. He's my son. Chloe stared at her, searching for any sign of genuine concern in her eyes, but found none. My mother had always been, and always would be, impatient with me. Chloe felt a profound sense of disappointment. She looked out the window, her voice flat. Ethan has gone away to school. He's never coming home. The color drained from Mrs. Clark's face. She grabbed Chloe's arm, her eyes blazing with anger. What school? Didn't he promise to give his spot at Harvard to Frank? Wait, the official letters haven't even been sent yet. That boy has been a liar since he was a child. When he gets back, I'm going to teach him a lesson he'll never forget. Chloe's heart sank. She felt a wave of pity for me. I was gone, and my own mother was still finding ways to blame me. She suddenly lost all patience. She pulled her arm away from my mother's grasp, her voice cold. Ethan enrolled at the National Defense University, not Harvard. Mrs. Clark's face twisted in an ugly sneer. What right does he have to go to the National Defense University? What about Frank? We've already told everyone we're having a party to celebrate. What is Ethan trying to do? Does he hate seeing Frank happy that much? No, you have to get him back here. He has to give up that spot at Harvard. She grabbed Chloe's hand and started pulling her towards the door, as if I had committed some unforgivable crime. Chloe tried to pull away, but my mother's next words stopped her cold. Frank tried to kill himself. He cut his wrists. There was so much blood. Chloe hesitated, but feeling she had no choice, she followed my mother to the hospital. After all, Frank's breakdown was triggered by her leaving. She felt partly responsible. On the way to the hospital, Chloe decided that as soon as Frank was stable, she would set the record straight. She would no longer be involved in his life. All she wanted now was to find me and tell me the truth. When they reached the door to his room, just as they were about to enter, they heard Frank singing. He didn't sound depressed at all. In fact, he sounded quite cheerful. For some reason, Chloe felt that something was off. She remembered what I had said, that Frank's depression was an act, that he wasn't sick, he just wanted to take what was mine. Before, she had assumed I was just lying out of jealousy. But now, after I had left in such despair, she began to wonder. Chloe stopped my mother, shaking her head slightly. She gestured for her to wait and listen. My father had gone to get some water, so Frank was alone in the room. Frank showed no signs of illness. He was lounging on the bed, legs crossed, with an arrogant smirk on his face. That bastard must be furious, he gloated to himself. I took his parents, I took his spot at Harvard, and now I've even taken his fiancée. Sure, it's a fake wedding, but all I have to do is throw another fit, and those two idiots will force Chloe to go through with it. Once she's mine, she won't be able to back out. I'm a genius. He was speaking quietly, but the room was so silent that the two women outside heard every word. Mrs. Clark stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. She thought she must have heard him wrong. Chloe's fists were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. A furious rage burned in her eyes. What had she just heard? Frank had been faking his illness. He had admitted to wanting to steal everything from me. My parents, my spot at Harvard, and finally, her. A chill went down her spine. She couldn't believe someone could be so malicious. Calling me a bastard, calling my parents idiots. Was this the same quiet, polite Frank they all knew? She turned to look at my mother, a profound sense of sorrow washing over her. For the sake of this monster, my mother had driven away her own son. The irony was sickening. Thinking back on everything I had been through recently, Chloe wanted to slap herself. They had been wrong, so incredibly wrong. They had been played for fools. And Frank's final comment, about forcing the issue, sent a cold shiver down her spine. She couldn't contain her rage any longer and kicked the door open. The smug look on Frank's face vanished, replaced by sheer terror. Auntie, Chloe, how long have you been standing there? Before Chloe could speak, my mother lunged forward and grabbed him by the collar. Why did you lie to us? She screamed. Frank fell to his knees, his face a mask of terror, but his eyes were already darting around, looking for an escape. My mother's face was pale with rage. She couldn't believe what she had heard. She had treated Frank like her own son, would have given him the moon and the stars, and had neglected me in the process. And how had he repaid her? By calling me a bastard and them idiots. My mother raised her hand to strike him, but Frank immediately burst into tears, wailing, Auntie, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. I was hallucinating. I had a nightmare that Ethan framed me and you all abandoned me. That's why I was saying those crazy things. Ow, my head hurts so much. He started banging his head on the floor again. Seeing the blood, my mother's expression softened with pity. and she instinctively reached out to help him. Frank saw her resolve wavering and felt a surge of triumph. I'm going to find out everything you've done to Ethan over the years. Chloe's voice was ice. My departure seemed to have shocked her back to her senses. She was the youngest captain in her division for a reason. She was more than capable. The color drained from Frank's face. He tried to explain further, but Chloe turned and walked out of the room. She was seething. If Frank was a liar, then everything she thought she knew was wrong. She couldn't bear to imagine the amount of pain I must have endured if Frank had orchestrated everything. The thought alone was horrifying. Using her father's connections, it didn't take long to uncover the truth about Frank. The file she received was filled with a litany of his misdeeds. Reading it, she was nearly consumed by rage. Now that she was no longer protecting him, people were willing to come forward and tell the truth. She even found a diary hidden in a secret compartment in his room, detailing all of his schemes. February 9th. My birthday. Dad got me a pair of sneakers. They're so ugly. Why did I have to be born in such a poor family? I wish he would just die. March 12th. Dad is finally dead, and he died saving Ethan. Why couldn't it have been Chloe he saved? Then I could have used that to get into the Anderson family. Still, the Clarks aren't so bad. Now that I'm living here, the first thing I have to do is get rid of Ethan. As long as he's here, I'll never have everything to myself. Luckily, my aunt feels so sorry for me. Every time I frame him, it works. I'm so smart. Chloe flipped through the pages until she reached the entry from a few days ago. Her face was pale with fury. To get rid of Ethan for good, I pushed him off the balcony. I can't believe he didn't even break anything, but it doesn't matter. Because of this, I get to marry Chloe. The hand holding the diary was white-knuckled. A fire of pure rage burned in her chest. She wanted to tear Frank limb from limb, so everything I had said was true. I had suffered so much. She remembered when she was younger, how she couldn't stand my parents' favoritism and had taken me in, promising to always protect me. But somewhere along the way, she had lost her way and forgotten that promise. All those nights I had spent, wrongly accused, lying on that shabby cot, tending to my wounds alone. A few days ago, when I was pushed, she had a chance to stand up for me, to find out the truth. Instead, she had slapped me without a second thought. I had left in despair, and now her world had gone dark. Chloe showed the diary to my parents. At first, they refused to believe it, but when they recognized Frank's handwriting, their entire world shattered. Faced with undeniable proof, Frank dropped the act. He fell to his knees before my parents, begging for forgiveness. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have lied. I was just so scared you would abandon me, that's why I framed Ethan. Please just give me one more chance. I promise I'll be good to you from now on. Blood trickled down his forehead, but my parents just stared at him with cold eyes. The contents of the diary were horrifying. It revealed a cruel truth. The nephew they had cherished, even at the expense of their own son, was a manipulative monster. My parents looked at each other, an overwhelming wave of regret washing over them. Was it too late to fix it? When Frank saw that his self-harming act was no longer working, he finally dropped the facade. His face twisted into a snarl. Was I wrong? Every man for himself. All I wanted was a better life. If I had to do it all over again, I would. My father let out a roar and kicked Frank across the room. He descended on him, punching and kicking until Frank was sobbing and begging for mercy. My mother joined in, her blows even more vicious. The love they once had for him had curdled into an equally intense hatred. Chloe watched with a scornful expression. What good was their regret now? They beat him until he was barely conscious, lying on the floor in a crumpled heap, too weak to even cry. When they finally stopped, my parents looked at Chloe, their faces etched with shame. Can you find Ethan? We've done him so wrong all these years. We want to try to make it right. Chloe didn't answer. She just stared out at the night sky, her voice filled with a pained confusion. And what if we do? We already lost him a long time ago. My parents shuddered, their heads bowed, tears welling in their eyes. The National Defense University, Southern Campus. This was a classified military installation, home to the forces that protected the southern region, and a training center for specialized personnel selected from across the country. The campus was split in two. The main garrison was on the outskirts of the city, but at the heart of the base was the academy for a select group of students. It was mid-morning, the sun high in the sky. The last dregs of summer heat lingered, an oppressive Indian summer. A group of cadets in uniform were running drills under the hot sun. Their clothes were soaked with sweat, but they stood as straight as pines, their gazes fixed forward. As students in the cryptography program, We were expected not only to master decryption algorithms but also to maintain peak physical fitness. I had been at the academy for 2 weeks. Thanks to the training regimen Mr. Anderson had put me through, I was just about managing to keep up, despite not being naturally athletic. The food here was much better than what I was used to. Even though it was 1983 and resources were tight, it was a world away from home, where meat was a luxury reserved for Frank, and I was left with vegetable scraps and a damp porch to sleep on. But here at the academy, with proper nutrition, I was finally starting to grow. I looked alert and full of energy, my eyes bright. I was a far cry from the heartbroken, listless boy who looked like he could collapse at any moment. I was becoming someone new. When I first met the admissions officer from the university, I had been struck by his commanding presence. It was true what they said, the military makes the man. Surrounded by soldiers of such caliber, who had time to think about romance. Basic training lasted for 3 months. I slowly adjusted to the rhythm of life at the academy. Days were for physical training, nights were for the library. I was in the cryptography program. The work I would be doing in the future would be incredibly dangerous. I would have to live my life as a ghost, my identity a closely guarded secret. Every student in this program was considered a valuable national asset. I cherished this hard-won opportunity to learn. Here, there were no biased parents, no unfaithful first love. There was only studying hard and serving my country. I devoured books in the library, often staying until late into the night, unwilling to leave. I was not alone. The library was always full of students from all over the country, each one the top of their class back home. I, who had been number 1 in my county, now felt an immense pressure. Everyone here was the best and brightest, each with a burning desire to serve their country. Late one night, I reluctantly left the library, marveling at the sheer volume of books. It was like a vast ocean of knowledge. You could spend a lifetime here and not read everything. Fortunately, I was focused on the basics of cryptography for now, trying to get ahead before classes officially started. The night air was cool. As I walked along the path, I paused and looked up at the sky. An image of my family flashed through my mind. I had left now, and I would probably never go back. The 4 of them were probably doing just fine. When I first arrived at the academy, despite my complete disillusionment, I still found myself thinking of them. It's natural to miss your family when you're far from home. But as time passed, the memories of my parents and Chloe began to fade. Now, they were just fleeting thoughts that no longer stirred any emotion in me. My feelings for Chloe had long since cooled. I wasn't without friends at the academy. Besides my 5 roommates, I had also gotten to know a girl named Michelle Davis, from Chicago. She was a very unique girl, completely different from Chloe. She was warm and outgoing, sometimes seeming as delicate as a hothouse flower, but she was also incredibly capable. Her understanding of cryptography was the most advanced of anyone I had met. Michelle had been considered the most beautiful girl on campus since the day she arrived. While the academy didn't forbid relationships, she certainly attracted a lot of male attention. Some said she came from a wealthy family in the city. Others whispered that she was just here to burnish her resume before moving on to bigger things. I didn't pay any attention to the rumors. I preferred to keep to myself. But to everyone's surprise, including my own, Michelle started seeking me out, making it clear she was interested in me. As I approached my dorm building, I saw a slender figure standing out front, smiling as I walked up. It was Michelle. She was always very forward with me, not in a romantic sense, but always wanting to discuss our coursework. Still, waiting outside the men's dorm in the middle of the night was a pretty bold move back then. The other guys heading back to their rooms couldn't help but glance our way with knowing smirks. I wanted to turn and walk away, but she looked like she would stand there all night if I did, so I had no choice but to approach her. She handed me a notebook, her smile radiant. "Ethan, I put together some study notes." I looked at the red notebook, hesitating. I was passionate about my studies, and I knew Michelle was brilliant. Classes hadn't even officially started, yet she already had a deep understanding of the material. She was a natural. We had met in the library. While the other new cadets were still caught up in the excitement of being on campus, I preferred to spend my time alone in a quiet corner of the library with a book. The reason I had gotten into Harvard wasn't just because I was smart. I had a great mentor. I had never mentioned him to my family, not even to Chloe. His political background was considered problematic, and he had been sent to a re-education camp for several years. People called him Mr. Gable. Mr. Gable was a brilliant man, knowledgeable in everything from astronomy to geography, but in those times, his intellect was considered a crime, and he was branded a dissident. When he fell gravely ill, no one would help him. At the same time, when I was 11, I had been thrown out of my house after being framed by Frank. We found each other in an abandoned church. I was just a boy, but I followed his instructions, gathering medicinal herbs for him from the hills behind the church, nearly falling to my death more than once. Thanks to those herbs, Mr. Gable survived. From then on, I would often visit him at the old church. Over time, he began to treat me as his protege, teaching me that knowledge was the key to changing my fate. His knowledge was far deeper and more extensive than that of my high school teachers. Under his tutelage, I grew into an independent young man with a love for learning. Despite the unfairness I faced at home, I held onto my kindness and my desire to serve my country. He was the reason I hadn't given up, the reason I had persevered. Mr. Gable had endured so much hardship, and he taught me by example that no difficulty was insurmountable. Unfortunately, he passed away on a rainy night just after I took my college entrance exams. I had gone to the old church to tell him the good news about Harvard, only to find his body. That night, I buried him myself on the hill behind the church and left with the jade pendant he had given me. I had lost the only elder who had ever cared for me, my mentor. I was devastated. The only person I felt I could turn to was Chloe, but that was the very day she made her offer, my spot at Harvard in exchange for our marriage. My world collapsed. I had just lost Mr. Gable. Was I about to lose everything else, too? In that moment of profound despair, I decided to live for myself. I changed my application from Harvard to the National Defense University, resolving to dedicate my life to my country. I left that place of sorrow with a single duffel bag containing a few ragged clothes and the jade pendant Mr. Gable had left me. In the library, I often found myself thinking of Mr. Gable and would sometimes take out the jade pendant to remember him. That's when Michelle had approached me, her eyes fixed on the pendant, shining with a strange intensity. I knew, of course, that there was more to Michelle than just her beauty. She had a special background. Rumor had it that she had been escorted to the academy in a military jeep and was personally greeted by the commandant. Ever since she saw the pendant, Michelle had been constantly seeking me out. Unlike the other more reserved female cadets, she was outgoing and didn't seem to care much for the rules. She thought nothing of waiting outside the men's dorm at night, completely ignoring the stares of others. I looked at the notebook she was offering and sighed internally. I felt I needed to set things straight with her. I took the notebook, then looked into her bright eyes, my expression serious. "Michelle, please don't come looking for me anymore." Michelle froze, her eyes welling up with tears. She looked like she wanted to say something, but in the end, she just lowered her head and gave a small, quiet nod. She didn't say a word, but her hurt was palpable. I fought back a wave of sympathy and watched her walk away. All I wanted was to focus on my studies and serve my country. I had no interest in romance. After that night, Michelle didn't approach me again. After basic training ended, the new cadets were given a day of leave. Most of them chose to leave campus and go into town. Cadets at the academy didn't have to pay tuition and even received a monthly stipend, which was a considerable amount of money in 1983. I didn't spend my money, however. I stayed on campus and went to the library as usual to study. Michelle was sitting across from me. She pulled a jade pendant from her pocket. It was the mirror image of mine. Mine was carved in the shape of a dragon, hers, a phoenix. Together, they formed a matched set. "I'm your fiancé," she said. Her words nearly knocked me out of my chair. The library was silent for a long moment. As a modern man, I hated the idea of arranged marriages. Especially after what happened with Chloe, I had become cynical about love and wanted no part of it. I had to admit, Michelle was incredibly bold. A few years earlier, a girl acting like this would have been labeled a delinquent and sent to a reform school. I took a deep breath to compose myself, then shook my head, my expression serious. "Michelle, please be mindful of your conduct. We're here to study and serve our country, not to pursue romance. We've never met before, so how could we possibly be engaged?" I was trying to warn her that if she continued, we would both be called in for a talk with our commanding officer. Michelle seemed to realize she had gone too far, that such talk could cause serious trouble for both of us. But after several days of deliberation, she had decided to tell me the truth. She pointed to the pendants and told me a story. The pendants were a matched set, one kept by her father, the other by an old friend of his. They had made a pact that if one had a son and the other a daughter, they would be betrothed. If they both had children of the same sex, they would be raised as brothers. Years passed, and her father never forgot his promise. But his friend had been exiled for political reasons and had disappeared without a trace. Her father had assumed the pendant was lost forever. Michelle herself had no plans to marry and had enrolled at the academy to pursue a career. But then, by a strange twist of fate, she had seen the dragon pendant around my neck in the library. After she finished her story, I was silent. It didn't sound absurd. Given Mr. Gable's vast knowledge, he must have been someone important before he became a victim of the political turmoil of the era. I never understood why, even after he was politically exonerated, he chose to remain in that abandoned church, living like a hermit. No wonder he had looked at me so strangely when he gave me the pendant. Now I finally understood. It was a betrothal gift. Logically, having a fiancé from a prominent family, one who could open doors for me, should have been a golden opportunity. But after what I had been through with Chloe, I no longer believed in love. At the academy, the only acceptable bond was the one between comrades. I hesitated for a moment, then took the dragon pendant from my neck and handed it to her. I'm not his son. If I had known how important this was, I never would have accepted it. It should be returned to its rightful owner. As for the marriage, let's just forget it. Before she could say anything else, I stood up and left. Michelle sat there, looking at the two pendants in her hand. Together, they formed a perfect circle. She felt a pang of disappointment. For some reason, from the moment she met me, she had felt that I was different from the other boys. My independent spirit, the mix of firm conviction and deep sadness in my eyes. It was a look she had never seen in anyone her age, like a bottomless abyss that drew you in. She clutched the pendants and walked to the window. The night sky was beautiful. The leaves of the sycamore tree by the training field were still green and vibrant, as if untouched by the coming autumn. I went back to my room and sat on the small balcony, staring up at the sky in silence. I decided it was best to focus on my studies and keep my distance from Michelle. After basic training, our academic classes began. In this era of progress and change, we were all hungry for knowledge. My classmates were driven by a powerful sense of purpose and a genuine desire to learn. In addition to my studies, I continued to train rigorously. I saw Michelle in the dining hall a few times. We would just nod at each other and go our separate ways. The rumors about us had gotten so bad that our commanding officer had almost intervened, but once we stopped speaking, the gossip died down. Most of the other guys seemed relieved. They seemed to think a girl like Michelle shouldn't belong to any one person. One day, I was on my usual run around the track when I suddenly stopped short. My blood ran cold. It was her, Chloe. The moment she saw me, her eyes locked on me, and she started walking towards me as if pulled by an invisible string. But when I took a small step back, the color drained from her face. The boy who had once looked at her with such adoration and happiness was now retreating from her. It was a defensive posture, one you would take with an enemy. It was as if a hole had been punched through her heart. The pain was so intense she could barely breathe, her face a mask of bitter sorrow. Did I really despise her that much now? She swallowed her pain and tried to step forward again, but I stepped back again, and the hurt on her face deepened. Ethan, before she could continue, I cut her off, my voice cold. This is a military academy, Captain. You should be mindful of your conduct. Shock flickered in her eyes. Why did my words sound so familiar? She suddenly remembered the day I had gotten into Harvard, how I had run to her, so excited to share the news. And what had she said? She had instinctively kept her distance, telling me, "We're in public. You need to be mindful of your conduct." A wave of regret washed over her. She finally understood how much her words had hurt me then. A look of deep sorrow crossed her face. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Ethan, you left without a word. Do you really want to cut me out of your life completely?" Hearing her question, my expression remained neutral. I didn't deny it, but my indifference was like a knife in her heart. She understood what my silence meant. Living in a loveless home, being forced to give up everything good. Once you start giving in, you have to keep giving in forever. I had been in despair. The only way out was to erase my identity, to live under a new name, and never have any contact with them again. How much despair must a person feel to make such a decision? The thought alone made her heart ache. I had lived that cruel life for over a decade. How did she have the nerve to even ask? If I hadn't left when I did, they would have eventually destroyed me. She raised her hand, as if to ruffle my hair like she used to when we were kids, but she stopped, her hand hovering in the air. When she met my cold, indifferent gaze, her spirit seemed to break all over again. "I'm sorry." 1,000 words, and all she could say was, "I'm sorry." She didn't know what else to say. I looked up at the sky, then my gaze drifted to the sycamore tree at the edge of the field. The memory of being 11 years old, thrown out of my house by my parents, crying under that very tree, flashed in my mind. Back then, She had been like an angel, bringing me hope when I had none. But it was that very hope that had ultimately pushed me into an abyss of despair, a pain that still lingered. I pulled my gaze away from the tree, my expression hardening. I looked directly at her. If you're here to get the Harvard spot back for Frank, then I'm sorry. It's too late. I'm not giving it up. The color drained from her face. She shook her head frantically. No, that's not it. Ethan, I just came to see you. She wanted to tell me it had all been a misunderstanding, that it wasn't that she didn't care for me. But when she thought about all the things she had done, she couldn't bring herself to say the words. Well, you've seen me. You can go now. I didn't want to be near her. Seeing her face just brought back all the pain from 6 months ago. It had taken me 6 months to even begin to heal. Why was she here now, reopening all the old wounds? She trembled, as if sensing she was about to lose me for good. She grabbed my hand, her eyes filled with a sorrowful plea. Ethan, how did we end up like this? Her voice was shaking, her face a mask of pain. I replied calmly, that's what I've been asking myself. Every time she had hurt me for Frank's sake, I had asked myself that same question. It doesn't matter anymore. Chloe, this is the last time I'll ever call you that. I wish you and Frank a long and happy life together. Please, don't come looking for me again. Just as she was about to protest, my next words stopped her cold, as if she'd been struck by lightning. I will always be grateful for the warmth and hope you once gave me. Please, don't make me hate you. She stood frozen, the color draining from her face. She didn't move until I was completely out of sight. Then she sank to the ground, overwhelmed by a wave of regret and sorrow. This woman, this soldier who wouldn't flinch at a bullet, was now on her knees, tears streaming down her face, her expression one of pure grief. The adoring, well-behaved boy she remembered from her past could not be reconciled with the cold man who had just walked away from her. She realized with a sickening certainty that she had truly lost me. A single leaf from the sycamore tree drifted down, landing on her shoulder. In that moment, she had never been more certain of her feelings for me. But by the time she realized it, I was already gone. The southern air was warm, but all she felt was an icy cold that numbed her to the bone, leaving her unable to move. She stared in the direction I had gone, and a delayed, sharp pain shot through her heart, so intense it made the world spin. When I had disappeared without a trace, her life had become a vacuum, filled with the grief of having lost the one she loved. Once her head was clear, she had quickly seen through Frank's deception and found the proof of his schemes. But why had she been so blind to my suffering for so long? For the past 6 months, she had been desperately searching for me, risking her own career in the process, but the classified nature of the cryptography program had made it impossible to find any information. Finally, unable to watch his daughter waste away, Mr. Anderson had called in a favor with an old friend at the academy. As soon as she found out where I was, she had come immediately. She had thought that if she could just see me, explain everything, things could go back to the way they were. But when she saw me, when she saw the calm indifference in my eyes, she realized how naive she had been. The way I looked at her held none of the love and admiration it once had. The boy who had shared everything with her, who had depended on her so completely, was gone, replaced by this cold stranger. She had wanted to explain so many times, but the memory of her actions had kept her silent, and she had let me walk away. Like an autumn leaf, our connection had fallen and was now returning to dust. She stood under the sycamore tree for a long time, looking at the fallen leaves, remembering the day she had taken my hand and promised we would never be apart. But she had broken that promise. The pain she had caused me was perhaps even greater than the pain Frank had caused. In that moment, she felt lost and heartbroken. She was finally experiencing the same despair I had felt, the complete loss of hope in her and my family. I didn't go back to my room. Instead, I walked around the campus. I just didn't want to face her. My peaceful life at the academy had been disrupted by her arrival. I was agitated. I found myself in front of the locked library, so I sat on the steps, shivering in the cool moonlight. When I was 11, she had given me hope. I spent 7 years loving her. But in the year I turned 18, it was Chloe who personally shattered all of my hopes. Now she had come to the academy, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But the memories of all the times she had hurt me flooded my mind, and I didn't know if I could believe her. The moment I saw her, I realized that even though I thought I had cut myself off from all emotion, I could still feel the sting of sorrow. I hadn't truly let go after all. Just then, a pair of long legs appeared before me, seeming to glow warmly in the moonlight. I slowly looked up and saw Michelle. Michelle sat down beside me, her gaze also on the night sky. "You should talk about it," she said softly. "You'll feel better." I had so much bottled up inside me with no one to talk to. I had buried so much pain over the years that it had nearly driven me mad. Even though I didn't know Michelle well, her presence gave me a surprising sense of security. Under the moonlight, I told her everything. My biased parents, my unfaithful first love, and the broken person I had become. My voice was quiet, as if I were telling someone else's story. Michelle rested her chin in her hand, listening silently. One of us spoke, the other listened, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. "Do you still love her?" she asked when I had finished. She turned to me, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, but her calm voice couldn't quite hide a note of anxiety. I thought I would struggle with the question, but for some reason, the answer came to me instantly. No, not anymore. I really didn't. When the disappointment had reached its breaking point, I had become immune to both familial and romantic love. Michelle seemed surprised by my quick answer. She was quiet for a moment, then a smile spread across her face, as bright and warm as a firework in the night sky. I had to admit I liked being with her. "Then you need to tell her that," Michelle said, standing up. "You can't move forward until you cut ties with the past." She patted my shoulder. "Go get some rest. Things will look better in the morning." Feeling a weight lift from my shoulders, I went back to my room and fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, the morning sun was on my face, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Over the next few days, I went about my routine, but I kept running into Chloe. I'd see her on the way to class, in the dining hall, even on my way back from the library at night. She would just stand quietly to the side, watching me with a gentle, searching expression. In her crisp uniform, with her beautiful, solemn face, she became a striking sight on campus. Gradually, people started to notice the connection between us. In the winter of 1983, old-fashioned ideas still held sway, and any hint of a romantic entanglement could easily become a serious issue of personal conduct. The rumor mill started churning. On the 6th day of her visit, the sweltering southern heat finally broke with a cold rain. I was in my room reading when my roommate mentioned there was a woman standing outside in the rain. I knew immediately who it was. After a long silence, I finally got up and headed downstairs. I decided it was time to talk to her, to make things clear once and for all. When I got downstairs, I saw her silhouette, blurred by the downpour. I took a deep breath and walked towards her. The first autumn rain carried a biting chill. Her figure was a blur in the downpour. She stood there, letting the rain soak her completely, her eyes, full of a desperate, pleading love, fixed on me as I approached. I looked at the woman standing before me, but my heart was calm. There was a time when I would have moved heaven and earth to make her happy if she was even the slightest bit upset. Now, seeing her so sad and miserable, I felt nothing but a calm, detached annoyance. A love that comes too late is worth less than nothing. The love I had cherished for years, the woman I had sworn to protect for a lifetime, had lost all meaning through her repeated betrayals. And now, after I had renounced love and dedicated my life to my country, she was here telling me it was all a misunderstanding. Perhaps our entire relationship had been one beautiful misunderstanding. I held my umbrella over her head and reached out to wipe the rain from her face. The gentle gesture made her eyes light up with a flicker of hope. "It's not worth it." I shook my head, a smile of release on my face. I looked past her, at the sycamore tree barely visible through the curtain of rain. "Thank you for everything you did for me back then. You helped me survive the coldest winters of my life. I was in so much despair in those years, a pain even deeper than what Mr. Gable endured. But it was also you who chipped away at my hope, piece by piece. Don't try to pretend it didn't happen. The scars are still there. They don't just disappear. Chloe, look at yourself. You're not the person I used to admire, the person I used to love." The color drained from her face. Her lips, blue from the cold, trembled as she shook her head, a choked sound escaping her throat. She wanted to tell me she was still the same person, still the one who cared for me, but when she met my calm, cold gaze, the words died in her throat. I wiped the rain from her cheeks. I was standing right in front of her, but she could feel me slipping away. She desperately wanted to hold on to me, but my words were like nails being driven into her heart, until her entire world was stained red with the pain. "Ethan, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I took a week of leave. That's all the time I have. If you don't want me to bother you, I'll just watch from a distance. I'll leave tomorrow. But please, can you just give me one more chance?" She wiped away her tears, her eyes pleading. I didn't answer. I just looked at her face, watching her cry, and felt nothing. In that moment, I think we both understood. She swayed on her feet, closing her eyes in pain. The fact that I could see her tears and feel no sympathy meant that I no longer loved her. I left the umbrella with her and turned to walk back to the dorms. This was my final word on the matter. I hoped we would never meet again. Chloe, Frank, my parents, the four of them could have their happy life together. And I, the one who was no longer needed, would dedicate my life to my country. I had no regrets. This was my choice. This was my destiny. After cutting myself off from love, I had to find my own light. She dropped the umbrella and rushed forward, wrapping her arms around me from behind, her voice a desperate plea. Ethan, don't leave me. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I didn't struggle. I just let her hold me and closed my eyes. I don't know how long we stood there, but eventually, the rain stopped. The moon broke through the clouds, casting its cool light on the sycamore tree at the edge of the field. The image of her holding me, our shadows bathed in the sudden moonlight, felt frozen in time. She slowly let go, a sharp, tearing pain in her heart. I walked away and didn't look back. Heartbroken, she fell to her knees, sobbing. She knew she had lost me for good. In that moment, she finally understood the despair I had felt, a feeling that clung to you like a disease, one you could never forget. She understood. She was filled with regret, but it was too late. Her leave was over. Chloe left the academy. She didn't come to say goodbye. She knew I wouldn't see her, that I had truly cut myself off from her. She knew, with painful clarity, just how wrong she had been. In fact, she had come here with a marriage license application, needing only my signature to make us legally husband and wife. But things hadn't gone as planned. From my reaction, it was clear that we could never go back to the way things were, let alone get married. Her heart was broken, and she had no one to blame but herself. She was the one who had pushed me away, who had rubbed salt in my wounds night after desperate night. Now, she was the one experiencing that same painful despair. So, she decided if you truly love someone, you let them go. She wouldn't give up on me. She would find her own way to atone, to make amends. She would show me, through her actions, that she was still the same girl who had taken my hand and promised I would never be alone. The day she left, the sky was overcast. As the train pulled away, she watched the city shrink in the distance, then closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes held a new, steely resolve. Everyone who had ever hurt me would pay the price, including herself. I didn't know what she was thinking, and I didn't care. After our final conversation, I returned to my life as a cadet. My life revolved around my studies and my physical training. For the first 6 months, I kept to myself. But eventually, Michelle became a constant presence by my side. After that night with Chloe, I understood something important. I couldn't live my life based on what others thought, and I couldn't let my emotions control me. Before, I had been so desperate for my parents' love and Chloe's approval that it had nearly destroyed me. So I stopped thinking about my cold, biased family. They weren't worth it. I stopped caring what other people thought, and I started spending time with Michelle. Of course, it wasn't romantic. We were simply study partners. Michelle clearly came from a well-connected family. She had access to the latest research and study materials. When she pulled a book on computer programming from her bag and started explaining its applications in cryptography, I knew I had to seize the opportunity to learn from her. From then on, we became inseparable. She used her family's resources to get me the most advanced study materials on cryptography, and I, in turn, would help her in any way I could. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple. Gradually, the gossip and rumors stopped. The academy was surprisingly progressive for the times. We were all young, open to new ideas, and part of a generation embracing change. Couples started to appear on campus. Our commanding officer held one meeting to remind us to be discreet, and after that, the issue was never raised again. So, our revolutionary friendship, as it was called, became an accepted part of campus life. A photograph of the two of us, studying side by side in the library, made its way to a military compound 1,000 miles away. In a dimly lit room, Chloe sat slumped on a sofa, her head bowed. Empty liquor bottles littered the floor around her, the air thick with the smell of alcohol. It was only the second time she had drunk since joining the military. The first was the night I confessed my feelings for her. She had drunk heavily that night, hesitating over her decision. The second was now, after seeing the photograph of me with Michelle. From the house next door, she could hear angry shouts. My parents were punishing Frank. After his deceit was exposed, his reputation was ruined. He couldn't find a job anywhere, not even manual labor. With no way to support himself, he was forced to continue living with my parents. but they no longer coddled him. The punishment they inflicted on him was 100 times worse than the suffering he had inflicted on me. Unable to bear the torment, Frank had gone to Chloe, begging her to intervene. But her punishment was even harsher than my parents'. From that day on, Frank's life became a living hell. They were all, in their own twisted ways, trying to atone for what they had done, hoping for my forgiveness. But did I care? My parents aged visibly, their faces a permanent mask of regret and sorrow. They lived in constant pain. Chloe refused every promotion, choosing to remain at her post, waiting for an opportunity. More than 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. Frank was a shell of his former self, tormented to the point of a complete mental breakdown. He had developed a genuine, crippling depression. Every night, after their ritualistic torment of Frank, my parents would retreat to their room and weep. They missed their son. They cried, they begged, they pleaded with Chloe to tell them where I was, but she refused. This, she told them, was their punishment. Finally, graduation day at the National Defense University arrived. That day, Chloe received a phone call. She left the compound immediately. Now it was her turn to atone. All units, take your positions. This mission is critical. There is no room for error. In the summer of 1987, there was a national movement for recent college graduates to aid in the development of the Western Territories. This also created a number of security challenges. In those days, a college education was a rare and prestigious achievement. Every graduate was considered a valuable national asset. The graduates of the cryptography program were part of this movement, but their path was different. A top-secret R&D center was being established in the West, dedicated to computer code breaking. It was a highly classified mission, crucial to the future of modern warfare. Upon graduation, our entire class was assigned to this new center in the West. Foreign adversaries saw us as a major threat and would stop at nothing to sabotage the project. A special forces unit was assigned to provide our escort. Chloe was the commander of that escort mission. She remained in the shadows, her presence kept secret to avoid tipping off the enemy. She stood on a ridge overlooking the road, watching our convoy pass below, her eyes as sharp as a hawk's. But when her gaze fell on the lead vehicle, her expression softened. Over the next few years, Chloe distinguished herself in the service, but she refused every promotion, waiting for a specific opportunity. When she learned that the cryptography graduates were being sent west, she immediately requested command of the escort mission. After I had left, she felt there was no reason for her to stay there anymore. She wanted to be the protector she once was, to show me that she had never truly changed. This was her penance, to protect me from the shadows. And once we reached our destination, she hoped she might have a chance to be near me again. It was the only thing she could do. Inside the convoy, I stared out the window at the endless desert landscape. The deeper we went into the Western Territories, the harsher the environment became. I was finally getting a taste of the harsh realities outside the academy walls. All the training we had endured seemed like child's play compared to this. 4 years at the academy had changed me. I was more mature, more composed. I graduated at the top of my class, the valedictorian. This mission to the West was a monumental undertaking. I noticed our convoy stopping several times along the way, but we always got moving again quickly. I didn't know that we had been attacked several times, each attack repelled by our escort. It wasn't until we arrived at the R&D center that I learned the true cost of our journey. Our escort unit had started with 200 soldiers. Just over 100 remained. We had no time to rest upon arrival. We went straight to work. I quickly assessed the communications equipment at the center and found it to be hopelessly outdated. I immediately wrote a report requesting a complete overhaul. I had published several influential papers while at the academy, papers that had significant implications for national information security. My superiors put me in charge of the project, not only to test my leadership but also to push our information security capabilities to the next level. I did not disappoint. In just 3 months, I had completely revamped the center's infrastructure, significantly upgrading our cryptographic defense capabilities. I was awarded the highest commendation for my work, just 3 months into my first assignment. While I worked, I often had the feeling that someone was watching me. But whenever I turned around, no one was there. I dismissed it as a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. One day, a flash flood in the desert washed out a critical communications relay. I was in the middle of a critical experiment. In the heat of the moment, I rushed out to try and salvage the equipment. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the situation was incredibly dangerous, but I managed to repair the relay. On my way back, however, the ground gave way, and I fell into a hidden cave. I was trapped. The storm was raging outside, making it impossible to contact anyone for help. I was in that cave for 3 days. Just as I was about to give up, my vision blurring, I saw a light. A familiar figure emerged from the light, helped me to my feet, and guided me out of the cave. Her frame was slight, but she was surprisingly strong. When we reached the surface, I took my first breath of fresh air. The feeling of being alive was incredible. I wanted to thank my rescuer, but she simply handed me over to the medics and disappeared. I tried to call out to her, but I had no strength left. I passed out. I was in the infirmary for 3 days. As soon as I had my strength back, I started asking about my rescuer, but no one would tell me anything. The director of the center came to see me personally and told me to focus on my work. He said that protecting the research staff was their duty and that I shouldn't worry about it. Anyone in their position would have done the same. I nodded and didn't press the issue. I did, however, learn from others that a special unit had been protecting us in secret ever since we left the academy. 3 years passed. In that time, I developed a second-generation communication system that dramatically improved our military's information warfare capabilities. As a result, I was promoted to deputy director of the center. On the day I was scheduled to leave the desert, the director invited me for a drink. He told me something I would never forget. Because of the critical nature of our work, the center was a constant target for enemy attacks. Over the past 3 years, enemy agents had launched over 70 attacks on our facility. All of them were repelled, but at a great cost. Many soldiers had lost their lives protecting us. "We succeeded," the director said, raising his glass. "We thwarted the enemy's plans and completed our mission. Now it's time for you to move on to bigger and better things." He pulled a photograph from his pocket and placed it on the table between us. He hesitated, then his voice dropped. "I wasn't going to tell you this. I didn't want to distract you from your work, but since you're leaving, the Special Forces unit assigned to protect us, they lost over 200 soldiers." I shuddered, my eyes stinging. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the fallen. The director nodded and sighed. "You know Captain Anderson, don't you?" "Captain Anderson?" I looked at him, confused. I didn't know any Captain Anderson. For some reason, an image of Chloe flashed in my mind, but she was probably still back home, married to Frank for years by now, with a child of her own. What would she be doing out here in the desert on a mission? But the director's next words hit me like a bolt of lightning. Captain Anderson was Chloe. She had been secretly protecting me for 3 years. When I fell into that cave, it was her who had risked her life to pull me out, injuring her leg in the process. There had been several assassination attempts on my life, and she had been the one to stop them, often at great personal cost. Now that the second-generation system was complete, her unit's mission was over, and they were pulling out. In her years on the front lines, she had been shot 3 times. One bullet had nearly pierced her heart, but she had refused to be reassigned, insisting on staying on the front line. "She's leaving today," the director said. He had probably guessed our connection and was giving me a heads up, even though Chloe had likely ordered him not to. I looked down at the photograph on the table. It was the one of me and Michelle studying together in the library. The part of the photo with Michelle had been torn away, but I recognized it instantly. Had she really been here all this time? Why hadn't she shown herself in 3 years? My mind was reeling. I thought of what the director had said. For 3 years, she had taken bullets for me, saved my life multiple times, yet she had never taken credit, had never even let me see her. She had just been there, in the shadows, silently watching over me. I suddenly remembered that day when I was 11, crying under the sycamore tree. She had appeared like an angel, taken my hand, and promised to protect me for the rest of my life. I had thought our last meeting at the academy would be the final time I ever saw her. But what she had done, it shook me to my core. I was no longer that naive boy, but thinking of what she had done for me, I felt an indescribable ache in my chest. I took a deep breath, grabbed the photograph, and ran outside. I got outside the main gate just in time to see a Jeep pulling away. I yelled after it, "Chloe!" There was no response. I had a gut feeling she was in that vehicle. Why didn't she answer? Inside the departing Jeep, Chloe saw me in the rearview mirror. A flicker of emotion crossed her cold, beautiful face, but she quickly suppressed it. Her aide hesitated. "Captain, should we turn back?" Chloe glanced down at her empty left sleeve, then closed her eyes. "Keep driving." In a fierce battle with enemy agents, she had lost her left arm while protecting me. Her superiors had ordered her to return home for medical treatment. She had wanted to stay to continue watching over me, but she knew that in her current state, she would only be a liability. She was protecting me silently in her own way, but the road ahead was long, and she could no longer walk it with me. Her heart ached with a pain she couldn't express. For 3 years, she had watched me from a distance, seen me working late in the lab, and had longed to go to me. But every time, the memory of how she had hurt me stopped her in her tracks. If you truly love someone, you don't interfere with their life. Besides, how could she, in her current state, ever be worthy of me? I deserved someone better. She left without ever telling me she had been there, and without saying goodbye. 10 years later, the country had undergone a massive transformation. Our national information security, now in its 4th generation of development, had made incredible strides. Through the tireless efforts of a generation of scientists and engineers, we were rapidly catching up to the world's leading powers. As a graduate of the class of '87, after more than a decade of work, I had gone from a green cadet to a leading expert in my field. I had dedicated my life to modernizing our military's information systems, becoming the youngest director in my division's history, and eventually its chief scientist. I spent most of my years in the remote desert, living a simple, Spartan life with none of the comforts of the city. My only desire was to serve my country. My superiors, seeing how hard I was pushing myself, ordered me to take a mandatory leave of absence. I was forced to leave my research base and return to the city. Because of the sensitive nature of my work, I was assigned a security detail and a military escort. But I disliked the fanfare, so after checking in with my security detail, I dismissed them and went on my own. My first stop was my alma mater, the National Defense University. I had been invited to give the commencement address for the class of '98. I looked out at the sea of young, eager faces, their eyes filled with admiration. As a legendary alumnus of the cryptography program, not yet 40 and already sharing the stage with the commandant, I was something of an idol to them. Looking at their adoring faces, I was reminded of the way I used to look at Chloe. More than a decade had passed. My love for her was a distant memory. The last image I had of her was that Jeep driving away into the desert. In the 10 years since, I had heard nothing of her. I had tried to contact her old unit to thank her, but I was told she had taken a medical discharge and was no longer in the service. I sat on the stage looking out at the cadets. They were the future of our nation's defense, just as I had been all those years ago. But my thoughts drifted back to my hometown. I wanted to see Chloe. I don't know why, but ever since I was forced to take this leave, I had felt a strange compulsion, a sense of unfinished business. It wasn't about rekindling a romance. At my age, my life was dedicated to my country. After leaving the academy, I went straight to my old hometown. I didn't alert anyone to my arrival. I went to my old neighborhood and stood under the sycamore tree. More than a decade had passed. The tree looked the same, but the dirt path beneath it had been paved over with asphalt. The old houses hadn't changed, still the same red brick and green trim. I stood outside the fence, looking at the house where I had grown up. I didn't think of my parents. They had Frank. I doubted they would even shed a tear if I died. I had come back to visit Mr. Anderson and to thank Chloe in person. But after asking around, I learned that Mr. Anderson had been transferred and had moved away. No one seemed to know much about Chloe's discharge, though they speculated she might have moved north with her father. And my parents, the people I least wanted to see, had also moved away for reasons no one knew. I was relieved, but also a little disappointed. My leave was short, and I was anxious to get back to my work, so I didn't stay long. I returned to the sycamore tree one last time and stood there for a long while. While I was standing there, I got a call. It was my wife, Michelle. "You've been away so long," she said warmly. "Now that you're on leave, aren't you going to come home? Your son misses you." "Daddy." Hearing my son's voice, a gentle smile softened my stern features. I hung up, got in my car, and drove away. A gust of wind rustled the branches, and a single sycamore leaf drifted to the ground. Autumn was here. I never noticed the figure in the window of Chloe's old house, silently watching me go. Chloe hadn't left with her father. She had stayed behind in this old house, waiting. She didn't know what she was waiting for, but she waited all the same. But now that I had finally returned, she couldn't find the courage to face me. She could only watch from the shadows, just as she had done in the desert. Before, she had been too ashamed to face me. Now she was too afraid. All she could do now was wish me well. Once she was sure I was gone, she slowly went downstairs and thanked her neighbors. If it weren't for their silence, I would have discovered she was still there. She picked up a basket and walked to the local cemetery. She stopped before the graves of my parents. Not far away was another solitary grave. 5 years ago, Frank, unable to bear the torment any longer, had murdered the two people who had once loved him most. In the depths of a severe depression, after killing my parents, he had gone into the bathroom and slit his wrists. By the time they were found, there were 3 bodies in the house. Chloe had used her influence to keep the news from me, not wanting to cause me any more pain. She looked at my parents' headstones and sighed, her gaze turning to the sky. "Ethan came back," she said softly. "He's doing well. You don't have to worry. You're at peace now. It's the living who have to suffer. We did wrong and we have to live with the consequences. Maybe this is how it was meant to be. I hope he'll be happy forever. I know that's what you would want too." She stood up and walked away. Her solitary figure cast a long, lonely shadow in the setting sun. She remembered the day I confessed my feelings to her, when I was 17. My face had been flushed, my eyes shining with an excited, hopeful light, as bright as the sun. If only she had said yes then, maybe everything would have been different. But there were no if-onlys. All she had left was a lifetime of regret. Washington, D.C. When I got home, I found my wife on the sofa, humming a lullaby to our sleeping son, her face radiant with a mother's love. Michelle and I hadn't married until we were in our 30s. I never expected her to wait for me for so long. I walked over to them, looking at the small, innocent face of the boy in her arms. He looked so much like I did as a child. I couldn't resist reaching out to touch his cheek. Michelle shot me a playful glare. "He just fell asleep," she whispered. "Don't you dare wake him up. If you do, you're on duty." I smiled sheepishly. In this house, I knew I was outranked. Looking at my wife and son, I felt a pang of guilt. I had spent so many years away, so much time dedicated to my work instead of them. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, inhaling the scent of her hair, and closed my eyes. I had a wonderful family. No matter how busy my work made me, I would always love my wife and son. I would never let them suffer the way I had as a child. Everything was going to be all right, just like our country, growing stronger and more prosperous every day. For without a country, there can be no home.